Welcome back to the next devlog for Ethan's Watch. So I've made a lot of changes to the AI, made it a little bit better. I also made these random island generators, which is pretty interesting. I can change the size of the island, how much land should be in the island, the different biomes of the island. Right now you can kind of see a couple squiggly lines. Those are actually denoting roads from key points of interest. The points of interest aren't actually showing up because you have to be close enough to them to see them. So that's going to be runways or suburban areas or the city type of areas. Those are just the main roads between those larger sections where they'll have roads in between those smaller areas. As you move around in the island, you can also see different areas. So here you have the player area, and so this is the only tile that will spawn the player's house, which is here, and then all the tiles surrounding it will all spawn as well. So I only made a few different test levels that are streamed in, but it's good enough for now, and we'll play through this so you can kind of see what those different areas look like. These are forest tiles, and then these tiles here, these are more rocky kind of tiles. These tiles here, these are the sandy beach tiles. This is the beach biome, and you can see it's a lot larger underneath, and that's because the mesh has to go down to connect into the water. So whereas these other ones, these green ones and these gray ones, they're not quite nearly as big because you don't want them going too far out. And so it looks pretty good. Eventually I'll make some way so there's a port or something here as well. It gives you another way to get to the other island. So if I go ahead and select the character, I can pick up these different weapons, and if I go to my inventory, I adjusted the layout of this a little bit, and I also made it so you can hold 3 weapons at a time. These different areas, these clothing equipment, all of that does change, and it does increase or decrease your defense. I just haven't created basic mesh for them yet. It's just been the logic behind it. So here's the rifle, pistol, and there's also nothing on them yet for any of the animations with the shooting animations, but that's alright. We can do that in a little bit later. And so there are still some zombies around here, and those are spawned in, and so you can still hit them, which is fun. And then if I get out here, these guys should probably start coming, and then they're dead. Still one shot, one kill. Makes it a little easier for me just to test things. But this isn't a super dense area. And then here's the first forest biome, and so each of these trees is interactable, so you can cut them down, and same thing with the bushes. But it does make it where you can see some of the other tiles as they load in, which isn't great, but it's a lot better on performance, and especially as this gets more complicated. So we'll just keep driving here for a little bit until I get to the beach. I made it so the biomes are less densely populated with their different resources, the further away from their like biomes. So if you have a bunch of tree biomes that are on the beach, they're going to have slightly less trees than ones more inland that is surrounded by more forest biomes. So here's the beach. Pretty good. Actually, I might... Alright, so I just added back, I went from 8 zombies in the suburban area where the player starts up to 24. So each one of those tiles should have 24 zombies. I hope none of them are immediately in this area. So each tile should have 24 zombies. Yeah, there's a decent amount more. And so that was another thing. All these levels are streamed in. So the nav mesh has to be dynamic. It can't just be statically built in, unless I built it into this one area. Oh yeah, and I added some attack animations, and so not too bad. They all have a difference in height. They all do actually give attack, but I haven't set it up so the player can feel any of it. And so right now they only do line of sight, so if you're not immediately in front of them, they won't see you for the most part. But I'm going to add hearing to them a little later. Let's try and find some more. Alright, here they are. Alright, and I'm out of ammo now. I can't hit them, but this feature hasn't actually been added. This is a raycast to do damage. It's mostly just for show right at this point, but that's kind of what the melee attack would do. I only have range attacks added. Anyway, so let me go ahead and show you guys the island generators itself. This is the island generator, just the main bigger one, where there's going to be more features. There's going to be a hospital on there, which is going to be key to the storyline. And then this is the starter island, where the player is going to start out. It's going to be much smaller. And so if you go to the details panel here, the world size, I have it for 10 kilometers. Tile size, that's how large each one of those different biomes are. That's going to be 100 meters. Target land ratio is about 0.8, excuse me, about 0.4. And this is how much portion of that 10 by 10 kilometer area should be filled with land or filled with that island. And this border buffer area, that is essentially, that's to help it so that it doesn't ride up right against the border of the 10 by 10. And that's to help make it so if a part of the city or part of the suburban area needs to expand further into the ocean, it can, because it has a bit of a buffer with it. And then there's a bunch of other information in here. I'm not going to go into all of it, but points of interest, this is talking about which areas to include, how large they need to be. Height, this is talking about the max height of the island, and I actually might show some of that because that's actually kind of fun to mess around with. And these are different tiles for what to populate each thing. So I just have the forest tile, the rocky tile, the beach tile, and then a test POI or points of interest tile. And so the city, suburban, and airport are all the same thing for that. So if I hit simulate now, you'll see exactly the same thing as you've seen before, which is a smaller island here, which is the player start island, and then this larger island, which is going to be where the player needs to eventually go to get everything that they need to survive. Target land ratio, we'll keep that the same, but I'll increase the max height by 10. And then I'll also increase the fall off by 2. And so let's play that. It should make a large peak kind of in the center. Yeah. And parts of this you can see through because these island tiles don't go all the way up, but that's what it would look like. And so if I stop that, I can change this. Let's just go back a little bit. And then I can still have this at 2. And it will still have a little bit of a larger bump in the middle, but the total island height won't be quite as high. And that's the fall off. So that means that the higher this number is, the more of a peak in the center you'll have. So if I increase this again, I'm not really sure what this is going to look like, but it should be just like a very strong peak in the center, having it this high. Yeah, so it's just like a little tiny peak, or yeah, all the elevation is held right in the center, and then it falls off, and everything else is pretty much flat all the way around. So 1 seems to be about right for this. So if I decrease this a little bit, let's go to like 0.1. It is definitely smaller, but it's not quite in incredibly small as what it might have been before. And that's because I have these other areas, so these points of interest, they will continue to grow until they hit their certain size that they need. And I'll actually go ahead and change the terrain on that, just so it's easier to tell the difference here. Now if I hit play, these red areas are points of interest that are important to whatever it's going to be. So if it's the city or suburban or an airport or whatever. So that's why we have that buffer built in. So if I go ahead and reset that to 4, hit play again, so now you can tell where these are. So this long rectangular strip, that's an airport layout, and then these other blobby areas, those are either suburban or a city area. And so if I increase the number of city tiles, let's say I make that 800, and I'll just bring this down to like 200 for here, it'll continue to grow out until it hits that full amount. So even if I hit stop, and like I said before, if I bring this down to like 0.1, everything's just going to be mashed up together. Yeah. And so, and then there's no roads showing here, but that's kind of what it ends up showing like. Just pretty cool. So I'll go ahead and reset that and reset these. And then if I want to add another, actually let's just make this one a lot larger. Let's make this one, let's do 20. So 20 kilometers by 20 kilometers, and I hit play. This should overlap into the next island a little bit, or just barely didn't. And so there's room to increase the total amount of size of this game, or just increase the amount of islands. And that's kind of what I want to do, but I think having just 2 for the first couple rounds and just trying to see how that works makes the most amount of sense. I can also add more points of interest, which would cause more roads to spawn. And I am going to eventually fix these roads, because right now it's just using a straight path between them, and which is good enough for now, but eventually I'd like to add them, like actually move around the terrain a little bit, or be a little more, look a little nicer. But I also just made these out of like some blocks and just was like left, right, left, right, left, right. Anyway, so that's where I'm at so far. Also, when building this random island generator, it's mostly procedural. It should be able to save this into a save file, and so then every time you replay the game on the same save file, it will be the same island layout, but every time you create a new game, it will run it once, and that is going to be a new island shape each time. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and appreciate any kind of feedback. See you in the next one. Bye.